is your bridge to the land and people of Israel. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Israel Connect. I'm Laura Densmore, your host, and I'd like to please encourage you to like and to subscribe to this YouTube channel. It really helps us to get the message out. I have a lot to cover for you tonight, and aid is not getting to the Gazans. And so what is the solution? What is the answer? Well, let's take a look at this first clip about how aid is not getting to the Gazans. Have a look.
موجودين هنا في داخل غزة قبل الناس الموجودة برا غزة، والله العظيم ستسألون. يعني قد ما تجمعوا مصاري وقد ما تجمعوا فلوس غير ربنا يسألكم، الدنيا فانية، جمعيات خيرية ومؤسسات خيرية ومبادرين، لكن إلا إنه هنا الناس اللي مش محتاجة هي اللي بتحصل على المساعدات قاعدة، والناس اللي محتاجين حظ الله ما بيشوفوها ولا بيعرفوا ايش هي أصلاً. بتكون ماشي في السوق لو بدك تشتري أي شغلة كانت بسيطة بتلاقي 100 طفل بيلحق فيك بده من هذه الشغلة ونفسه فيها، لأنه أصبحت غالية. يعني فيش الحاجة اللي كانت سعرها نصف شيكل يعني لا تذكر اليوم سعرها 4 و5 شيكل. يعني في الأيام العادية ما حدش بيعطي لأولاده هذا المصروف، فما بالكم اليوم في حالة الحرب اللي احنا فيها. والله العظيم ناس ما هي لاقية تاكل نهائيا، ما بيشوفوا أي شغلة من المساعدات، وناس ثانية من يعني وضعها بخير امورها بخير وبيوتها ما تاثرتش وحالها زي ما هو ولا عندهم اي مصاب، والمساعدات بتنكب عليهم كب من السماء. هذا دليل على انه ما فيش انصاف. مؤسسات خيريه او جمعيات خيريه كلها بالمسميات، كلها للمعارف ومحسوبيات صارت.
So Israel has been doing everything it can to truck in humanitarian aid to Gaza, and it's not working. And so we have another clip now that I'm going to show you of an Egyptian trucker who warns other truckers not to go in to Gaza. Have a look.
يا جماعة ما حدش يخش جوه، الفلسطينيين ما خلوش ولا عربية اللي هم كسروها، وزي ما انتم شايفين كده العربيات اتكسرت ما عادش نافعة. طوب من جوه خرم الظهرية وده دم السواق، زي ما انتم شايفين الكابينة ما عادش نافعة.
شوف بدلوا العربية اخر بهدلة ازاي، والسواق جاي مضروب ومتبهدل. اتفضل. هذا الناس بتوع غزة يا سيدي.
In this next clip, we see how Hamas gunmen immediately board the trucks that are carrying in humanitarian aid. And so obviously the aid is not getting to the common citizens of Gaza. Instead, it's going straight into the hands of Hamas. They take what they want, and then they turn around and sell the rest of it on the black market at very high prices to the Gazans. Have a look. In the last situation, a number of Israeli truckers were attacked by a big mob of Gazans, and some people got stampeded, and it was just a huge mess. And so the next method for trying to get the aid into the Gazans is to do an airdrop. So here we have the USA doing an airdrop of humanitarian aid. Now, some of the aid fell into the ocean. Some of the aid packages actually landed on people and harmed them. But here is how the aid is being dropped into Gaza from the U.S. Air Force. And now let's take a look at the reaction of local Gazans. Are they eagerly accepting this aid? Is this something that they want to have or to use? Are they hungry that they'll take the aid and use it? This local Gazan man shows what he thinks about this aid.
هذه مكانها واحد وحيد. هاي المساعدات تنحط بكيس اسود زي هذا، اوكي؟ وبتنحط ثواني اورجيكم وين، وبترتمي في الجماعة اللي زي هذه.
And so now the Biden regime has proposed that they're going to build a temporary port so that aid can come in via the sea and get to the Gazans. But is that really going to solve the problem? Now we're looking at Jewish News Syndicate, and this is a really great news story. Will the U.S. port in Gaza deliver aid into the hands of Hamas? And so U.S. President Joe Biden announced that the U.S. Navy is going to open up a port to deliver humanitarian aid to Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Will this be successful or even be properly inspected? Does it shift scrutiny away from Israel? Is it part of a larger effort by the Biden administration to isolate and undermine Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government? Now, Jonathan Tobin, editor-in-chief at Jewish News Syndicate, wrote an opinion piece that I thought was really excellent. And the headline reads, "The problem in Gaza is Hamas, not how to provide aid." So Biden's floating port scheme is a potential trap for both the U.S. and Israel, as well as an opportunity for terrorists to exploit sympathy for Palestinians. So the bottom line is, as long as the terrorist group is still armed and in charge of any part of the coastal enclave, and is still able to use parts of the tunnel system that it built with international aid intended to help ordinary Palestinians, all talk about humanitarian concerns there is essentially a diversion. So really the answer is to ultimately completely eradicate the Hamas military structure so that humanitarian aid can be distributed by any means, through trucking, by air, or by sea. The problem is Hamas. It's not how do you deliver the aid. AIPAC is meeting right now, and Netanyahu was one of the speakers at AIPAC. Typically in the past, AIPAC has been infused with a lot of liberal Jews who have liberal thinking and who are very much pro-Palestinian two-state solution. And so it'll be very interesting to see if there's a shift in their thinking regarding all of this. The two-state delusion is what I'll call it, and what a lot of people are calling it. It's a two-state delusion. So Netanyahu had some words to share at the AIPAC meeting. Take a look.
To win this war, we must destroy the remaining Hamas battalions in Rafah. If not, Hamas will regroup, rearm, and reconquer Gaza. And then we're back to square one. And that's an intolerable threat that we cannot accept. We will destroy Hamas, free our hostages, and ensure that Gaza doesn't ever pose a threat to Israel again.
Israel is poised to go into Rafah, the southernmost point in Gaza that borders Egypt, because there are still 4 squadrons of Hamas battalions down there. And to really finish the war, they need to go into Rafah and take out Hamas there, and also seize control of the border to Egypt so that Hamas terrorists cannot continue to smuggle in arms and weapons and supplies and run through their tunnels. But Biden and his regime have been applying extreme pressure against the Israeli government and against Netanyahu about going into Rafah. And so there was recently a great news piece that I want to share with you, coming from Israel 365 News. And here it is. Biden may condition military aid if the IDF enters Rafah. Now, the season of Ramadan began on March the 10th, and it goes for about a month until I think April the 9th. And so, of course, there was all kinds of meetings about trying to get a ceasefire in place and get the hostages out, and all of it fell apart. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes. But now Biden is really twisting the arms and trying to tell Israel what to do and tell Israel how to run their war. And then he's saying that he's going to condition military aid if the IDF enters Rafah. So basically, he's saying, we'll still give you what you need for the Iron Dome to protect yourself defensively against incoming missiles and rockets coming from Hezbollah and coming from Hamas. But we're going to maybe hold back on any offensive weapons that you would use to win the war. This is really the administration turning on its head against Israel and being more concerned about taking care of Hamas than it is about taking care of Israel and its citizens. So the temporary port that the U.S. is proposing to build is basically, it's for Hamas. And there's no guarantee that anything that's unloaded and offloaded from ships is going to go to the citizens, to the Gazans. It's very likely going to end up right into the hands of Hamas. So it seems that the agenda of the Biden regime is they want a two-state solution. They want a Palestinian state, which we know is a delusion. There's absolutely no support for this politically from Israel. The Knesset recently voted overwhelmingly that they would not go with a unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. And the people of Israel do not want a Palestinian state. That would be basically rewarding the terrorism that took place on October the 7th. Now we're going to hear from Jake Sullivan from the State Department, and he has been involved in negotiations for trying to get the hostages released. Now that Ramadan has begun, there had been the hope that there would be a ceasefire and the exchange of the hostages for the ceasefire. But Jake Sullivan has some pretty choice words about this. Have a look.
When it comes to the issue of the hostage talks, one of the things that I have found somewhat absent from the coverage is that what we are talking about in the first phase is women, elderly, and wounded civilians. Those who would like to see a ceasefire in Gaza, a ceasefire is on the table today for 6 weeks to be built on into something more enduring if Hamas would simply release women, wounded, and elderly. And the fact that they will not do so says a lot to me about Hamas's regard for innocent Palestinian civilians. The fact that they are holding on to those folks and refusing to release them and refusing to step up and say that we could get this ceasefire in place, which not only would bring calm to the fighting, but also would create an enormous opportunity to flow humanitarian assistance in much greater.
And now I want to wrap up with 3 really great good news stories. This next clip is Mazel Tov to some new IDF recruits. Have a look.
לוחמי משמר הגבול פועלים יום וליל בעיר ומחוץ לה, נמצאים בנקודות הרגישות, מגינים על המקומות הקדושים בה, שומרים על הסדר הציבורי והדו-קיום בין אזרחיה. טקס זה מהווה אבן דרך ראשונית בדרככם להפוך ללוחמות ולוחמים במשמר הגבול.
הרגע הזה ללא ספק יחרד בזיכרונכם כאחד הרגעים המכוננים בחייכם. דורות חלמו להגיע לירושלים ולארץ ישראל ולהגן עליה, וברגע זה התחייבתם אתם, 520 לוחמים ולוחמות בהכשרה, להקריב ולהקדיש את כל כוחותיכם למען משימה נעלה זו. נשבעים אתם לשמור אמונים למדינת ישראל, ובזאת מצטרפים למשפחה הנחשפת, משפחת משמר הגבול. משפחה אשר תרומתה הביטחונית למדינת ישראל היא לאין שיעור, ולא בכדי אני רואה בנו חומת המגן של עם ישראל.
And in this next clip, we see some IDF soldiers who are rejoicing with Torah scrolls, but in a very unusual location. The Torah scrolls have returned to Gaza. Have a look. And finally, in this last clip, we are going to see how IDF women soldiers are absolutely fearless. Thanks for joining me tonight. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.